You're listening to Tabletop Arcanum, a podcast dedicated to learning and exploring the hobby of tabletop gaming. Your hosts are Justin Taylor and Richard Geese, so sit back and relax as we talk, discuss, and joke our way through the hobby we love so much. Everything you've heard about me is true. Lando Calrissian. In Star Wars Outer Rim, you and your friends take on the roles of bounty hunters, smugglers, and mercenaries and set out to make your mark on the galaxy. You'll travel the Outer Rim in your personal ship, hire legendary Star Wars characters to join your crew, and try to become the most infamous or famous outlaw in the galaxy. Will you make your name by hunting bounties for the Hutts, stealing for the crime syndicates, or smuggling goods past the Imperial patrols? All this and more is possible as you adventure through the outskirts of the known galaxy. Set your coordinates, gather your crew, and make the jump to hyperspace with Star Wars Outer Rim.
Hey, welcome to Tabletop Arcanum with your hosts,
Justin
and Ricky. And if you couldn't guess by now, we got our hands on Star Wars Outer Rim.
This is true.
And it made me feel a lot of things I haven't felt since I was a child. So you know what? We'll get into that. But before we begin, of course, we have to start with our roll recap.
It's true.
So since our last recording, me and Justin did the impossible. Actually, the possible. Just I have a really bad schedule, so it took forever. Yes. We finally got through all of Betrayal Legacy. So played 2 more games of that.
Yeah. Cap that thing off.
It was a good end to it. I don't want to ruin it for anyone, especially if we do release the episodes of us recording it.
I mean, when we release these episodes.
When we release it, it just makes me feel so happy the way that it ended. No one else was happy. I was very happy. Other than that, of course, we both played Star Wars Outer Rim.
Mm-hmm.
I made a declaration on the last episode that I was going to finally make it out to LCG night at Lindsay's Gamers Garrison, and pulled through. Came out, had a blast. We did not win, but you know what? It's the friendships we forged along the way. Along the way of going crazy. So,
right,
fantastic. It was great. Other than that, I have played just a few smaller games here or there. More 5-second roll, more Harry Potter. The usual. What have you been up to over there, Justin?
Well, besides Arkham, which we played together, the crew of us stayed a little bit late after you had left and busted out the Pathfinder Adventure card game.
Oh, no, I watched you guys play. Remember? I sleeved every single one of my Arkham cards in that time.
Yeah. You're right. You were there.
There were a lot of cards.
So was Pathfinder. So this was the new core set release, so one of the local guys picked it up, and we started powering through learning that game. Also got a game of X-Wing in, got some ships on the table again, and flew around. Obi-Wan, Anakin, and Tucker, I think, was the third ship. So I got to fly those around, had a lot of fun using the Delta 7 Aether Sprites. And realistically, then it was just Outer Rim. And the other mentions would be like the free RPG day that we hosted at Lindsay's Gamer Garrison. So we had 4-5 different RPGs throughout the day. Kind of always had something running at any point of the day. We had a beginner box Starfinder session. We had a End of the World, which is also very good for one-shots. There was a couple of times, I think 2 times, people played Dread, which is that survival horror RPG where you essentially pull Jenga blocks to take your tests. And if the tower falls, you die.
Yeah, fair enough.
So it's like, who can survive the longest? One of the local regulars picked up and ran a Starship Troopers themed Genesis game using the Genesis system. So they were trying to go kill a brain bug. And then we had a 5th edition D&D one-shot as well. So lots of that. But more importantly, during that time, that was the same day that the GW contrast paint line was launched. So they were running demos and testing of all of those paints all day. And even on their Facebook, you can see all the different samples of people painting. He had opened a couple spare boxes of A Song of Ice and Fire, which had a lot of detail on those models, pre-primed them, and then literally put them out on a table and went, grab a model, slap some paint on it, see how it works.
Very nice.
So you didn't have to even use your own model. You pretty much just had to come in and test it out. So those are looking really great. There is, we'll talk about in the news a little bit more about those, but that's my roll recap.
All right. Well, if that's the case, of course, everyone knows. Now it's time for the news. To top it off, or to start out, we're going to go into our giveaway. We did pull a winner, and congratulations to Michael Chrisfield from Muncie, Indiana. You'll be receiving your copy shortly. We've already talked to him. We just wanted you all to know that we're not just playing behind the scenes with our own board games.
Right. So we'll be sending that Lord of the Rings Journeys in Middle-earth your ways.
Very shortly. Awesome. So other than that, we did have a lot of stuff be demoed, announced, quite a lot, especially with Origins Weekend.
Mm-hmm.
A few that I really saw that I know that I am going to pick up immediately. Toy Story Obstacles and Adventures. It's being released by The Op. 2 to 5 player co-op, due out in Q4 of this year. Pretty much, this is my girlfriend's other favorite movie series, and it's made by the same company that makes Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle, so that means it's pretty much, it seems like it's going to be the same game but with Toy Story, so I know that it'll be easy for her to jump into and enjoy. Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle, Defense Against the Dark Arts, is now available. It's a 2-player, similar to the other Hogwarts Battle game, but instead of being co-op, it's a 2-player competitive game. I did see that Paradox Interactive is releasing City Skyline through Cosmos. It's going to be a co-op 1 to 4 player based on Paradox Interactive's Steam game. And then I know we didn't mention this on the last episode. It was announced a little bit ago. But you should be seeing Pandemic Rapid Response soon by Z-Man Games. It's a real-time co-op game. It's going to be available June 23rd. That is going to be in Target exclusive for a little bit, and then you'll start seeing it filter into your friendly local gaming shops. But that looks like kind of like a cross between Pandemic and your 5-minute Marvels, where players are rolling dice and they're trying to get certain dice rolls to send out supplies. Other than the games that are announced and or released or anything fun like that, they did have the Origin Awards winners posted. Game of the Year is going to Root by Letter Games.
Mm-hmm.
Board game, Root as well. Card game, The Mind by Pandasaurus Games. Family Game Award goes to the T-Dragon Society card game by Renegade Game Studios.
Mm-hmm.
Collectible games, Keyforge, Call of the Acrons by Fantasy Flight Games. You've heard us talk about them many, many times. Role-playing game goes to Vampire the Masquerade 5th Edition by Modifist Entertainment. We played that back at Gen Con last year. That was a ton of fun. Role-playing game support goes to Mordecai's Tome of Foes by Wizard of the Coast. Miniature games, we do have Necromunda by Games Workshop, as well as Star Wars Legion by Fantasy Flight Games. So our boys over there at Fantasy Flight Games, 2 winners. I'm just excited about Star Wars, you know me.
Right. I think that's more it than anything else.
Yeah, pretty much. And then best game accessory, Black Dragon Trophy Plaque by WizKids.
It's hard to call that an accessory. It's a wall feature.
It's still fun.
It's
big.
big.
Yeah, I mean, you could throw that down on the table and just say, oh, there's a portal opening.
It's big.
I know you had a few items, too.
Right.
What's coming out and all that fun jazz?
So the GW contrast paints. They made this huge push on it, and they almost pull off exactly what they promise. Because it's essentially the idea behind these contrast paints is you put one thick coat opposed to like two thin coats, as they always used to suggest. You don't water it down. You actually just base coat the model with the special contrast base coats, and then you put the paint right over it. It works like a glaze or a wash, so it's very liquidy and moves around. It stains the high points and then pools in the darker zones. And so you get this beautiful like highlight and shade all in one paint job. The benefits that we've seen so far is in the hands of experienced painters, you can pull off some crazy effects in like a quarter of the time that they would normally be taking with regular, the standard paint lines. It does take some getting used to. So definitely use it on some test models first and kind of get familiar with how it works, because you don't water it down. You really like paint right out of the pot, which is a very counter to most painting when it comes to minis. If you do want to dilute it down, they do have a contrast medium that you can use to make it a little bit more, tone it down a little bit there. But ultimately, the big thing is it in the hands of a hobbyist, it's going to do amazing things for them. But is definitely not necessarily amateur's quick fix either. So don't expect to. I've never painted a model and then be able to throw out amazing models with this. You will be able to get tabletop quality models very fast with it, though. Especially if you're doing on like horde armies or multiple units of the same thing. This will help get a lot of that gray plastic away from the table and then have at least some color out there for you. FFG did post some information about the Worlds events that are coming up. They split Worlds up into all the separate games now. So like Star Wars has its own Worlds events, and it's all the Star Wars games kind of fall into the same kind of bucket there. But now it used to be like L5R and Game of Thrones, their Worlds events were put together. They're actually splitting those up. So L5R Worlds is going to be in November. That's November 6th through 10th. And then the Game of Thrones Worlds is actually going to be in February, and that's February 7th through 9th. Both of these are going to be up in the Roseville, Minnesota at the event center. But it's a little interesting to see everything kind of split up and then having to make multiple trips, which is not necessarily as bad as having to choose which game you're going to play. So if you're actually into both games, you can attend both events. Arkham Horror expansion Dead of Night for the 3rd edition board game was announced as well earlier this month. That's going to be adding more scenarios, more investigators, more monsters, and even a little cardboard monster tray, kind of like the Mythos deck encounter deck had. So they're getting another little like display tray for you. The benefit of this is during that stream, it was mostly confirmed through a tweet with Fantasy Flight that Arkham Knights is going to be October 11th through 13th this year. So to actually kind of have, because people have been kind of pushing for advanced dates because, time off work, travel plans. It's something that, we need a little bit of notice for opposed to like 2 weeks that we've seen before. Kind of a heads up is my last piece, and this is for if you're looking to go to Gen Con. Broken Token until I believe it's the 1st of January, is doing free ship to the con. So
1st of July.
1st of July, what did I say?
January.
Yes.
I mean, you can order in January, but
you can't get free ship to the con at that point.
Yeah.
So 1st of July. So make sure if you are going to go to the con and want to save on shipping on these things, because they definitely charge a lot for shipping because it's a lot of weight, as we've talked about in our Gen Con episode. This time I won't make you carry it.
We've already had this discussion.
Technically, you volunteered.
I did. I did volunteer for that. but we had a discussion that either we'll run it over to the room right away or wait until the end of the day to just go and grab it instead of grabbing it first thing in the morning and then walking around the whole day.
Exactly. So that pretty much does it for the news. On to Kickstarter Corner.
I did see, did you see that Shovel Knight Dungeon Duels by Panda Cult Games?
Nope.
They have some great, they've already put up a few 3D renderings of the minis. And it's exactly what you would expect to have a Shovel Knight game. Everything looks pretty cool so far. I'm waiting to see more from it to see how it's going to play out. But that is going to be starting July 2nd. So we do have about like 2 weeks until that comes out.
Okay.
Yeah.
To when it launches, right?
Correct.
As of recording today, AEG put out the Thunderstone Quest Kickstarter. This is the third Kickstarter for Thunderstone Quest, and you can actually get all of the Kickstarter goals from the other campaigns into this. So if you don't have anything, this is a great time to jump in and get Thunderstone Quest, which is that deck builder game. They revamped it 2 years ago, then released a co-op expansion in the last Kickstarter, and this time they're adding just even more quests. I think they're up to 9 total quests.
Very cool.
With this expansion. So that is actually a really nice benefit if you don't have it yet. This is definitely a way to save some money and get a bundle version of it. Or if you do already have the retail, this is a way to get some of those exclusives as well. And then Tomb Guardians is still running their Kickstarter, which is successfully crushed their goals and doing great stuff.
Those tiles look amazing. They look gorgeous.
He's still got almost a month left. They've already reached their goal. And at this point, it is just icing on the cake for what's going on in there. It is a little bit on the heavier cost side because it is highly detailed rendered models. Mm-hmm. And they're even using a professional printing machine to make sure that those micron levels are so small, you're not seeing the layering, you're getting a beautiful product right away.
Mm-hmm.
So that about does it for the Kickstarter Corner. On to our main topic, which is Star Wars Outer Rim, the review. So this game was initially to come out earlier in this month, so we shuffled things around because it got delayed. So we got a little time with it, but not as much as I would like. But at the same time, that means our review is going to be popping out pretty much within a week of it coming out. So
exactly.
So it is a 1 to 4 player game put out by Fantasy Flight Games. Game design was credited to Corey and Tony. Corey's done a lot of stuff for Fantasy Flight, so seeing his name is kind of like a stamp of quality in a lot of aspects. Oh, yeah. The game itself is retailed for about $65, and plays in about 2 to 3 hours, which with 2 players is about right. With 3 or 4 players, add a little time to that unless you've actually played it before. Just because it's just more of everyone taking a turn. Turns are relatively fast, but then 2 players to 4 players, you're literally doubling the amount of time in turns.
Once you start getting used to the game, the turns start becoming rapid fire because you're just getting through them. I did notice when we started playing, turns would take us maybe 3 to 5 minutes just to kind of figure out where we're going.
Right.
And then it's just kind of once we play for a little while, we started lasering in on exactly what we're going to do. Like, okay, this, done.
Right.
So if you play quite a bit, yeah, you could probably take that time down, but anticipate spending some good time sitting behind it and good quality time. And it's a fun game to jump into.
Okay, so first impressions. What do you got?
It's an interesting take on the board. I do like the horseshoe layout of everything because we've seen games Because we've seen games similar to this, like Firefly, where you just have the giant board and there's multiple routes going everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
You are kind of in a linear path to get from one side of the board to the other side of the board. I thought all the art was very, very nicely done. There's a lot of little tiny Star Wars references. Well, of course, there's Star Wars references all over the place. But there's a lot of nods to super Star Wars fans, people who've read into the books, or people who have seen the extended outside the movie universe.
Mm-hmm.
So it's nice to play through because you see a lot that really is geared towards you, essentially. How'd you feel about opening that box up?
It definitely has a decent amount of components to it. A lot of it is cards. It's all the same size card, which is something I do appreciate. Their games tend to mix up like the American-sized board game with mini cards, and I don't like to look at small print if I can help it.
Mm.
So I don't mind the more larger cards and not have to worry about it. The actual game boards for the player stuff and your ships is very well laid out. It goes very wide, so if you're playing solo, that actually has a small issue, because then you're looking at having 4 of those in front of you opposed to 2. So it can get a little hectic if you don't have a wide table space. It does make up with that horseshoe board, where you can kind of put your market cards and your other things kind of inside of it to help kind of contain the mess a little bit. So it keeps the footprint very flexible, except for your player area, which does need a little bit of space side to side. The big thing that I noticed is that they're still using the database or data bank cards, which is what we've seen in the Codex for Fallout, and we've also seen that in Arkham 3rd Edition with the Archive. So it's literally a deck of cards that is not shuffled. It's an ordered number of cards, and the game will tell you to fetch card X and do what it says. So it's a new mechanic that they've been exploring in a couple different games. And this is just another one of, yes, you found this particular character, but then you have to grab this card to see really what's going on. Or maybe you got a job that you're trying to do the Kessel Run or something like that. It tells you the basics of what you need to do on the card, where to go. But then to actually do the Kessel Run, you have to grab that card out of the data bank.
I did like the reverse of that. They had a lot of, if you fail, pull this card. And when you look up that card, that number card, there's 3 or 4 of them.
Correct.
So you shuffle them and you pick one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And that really gives you a varied feeling to the game itself, instead of, okay, I lost, I know exactly what's going to happen right now. It could be bad or it can be all right. Like, it really makes it feel like I don't see it getting stale as quick as a game that's just like, that just says, if you fail, then lose this, or
right. And that's where taking the narrative out of that deck, which is where it lived in Fallout, I think helps. Because Fallout, you kind of knew the paths once you played a scenario once or twice. Like, okay, I have to do this, which gets us this card, which does this, which will get us that card, which will... It does seem like the design has kind of evolved from there, which is very good. The one thing that I will also compare this to Fallout is those player dashboards in Fallout are self-constructed. So you have like this little like special section that you had to actually punch like the double layer cardboard together with little pegs. The double layer cardboard in this one for your player dashboard is completely 100% done for you, ready to go. And quality-wise, it's a little bit nicer for that. So talking about setup. It's a pretty fast game to set up. You sort the decks, you throw everything out, you build the board. The board itself has a standardized layout, but they do suggest that if you want, you can shuffle it up and lay it out in whatever order you want. It just may provide some game imbalances. And that's mostly because there might be, for example, Jin Urso's personal goal is to blow up the 2 Imperial planets. And in the preset board, they're pretty much halfway across the galaxy from each other, but there is a possibility they could be next door neighbors, which would set her at a very quick advantage with a board setup like that. Mm-hmm. So there is definitely logic to how they have it preset, but you can always mix it up if you want.
I did see when we were playing, a lot of the jobs were in one corner or the other corner. So that's another one where I can see, if you shuffle it, all of a sudden everything in the deck is smack dab in one area. Yeah.
A lot of it does also come to where you are and where you pick it up. Because the market deck that you're talking about for those jobs is randomized. Mm-hmm. For example, I had the gift for Jabba Rancor that I just had to pick up on anything that's not Tatooine. So me plant hopping one step over,
pick it up.
I was able to pick it up one turn and then next turn go and deliver it. So it's all really what's available in those decks and what's there, and where you are compared to the destination is more key than anything else. So setup is pretty quick because a lot of it is put everything out, put the tokens in a pool, grab your hero or bounty hunter or whoever character you're going to represent, and you get one of the 2 options of a starter ship. So you can get the G1A Starfighter or the G9 Rigger, more of a cargo ship. So one's a little bit faster, one's a little bit more geared towards ship-to-ship combat. Most of the characters will also fall into 2 categories. They'll either be kind of a smuggler or they'll be more of a bounty hunter. Doesn't necessarily put you out of the camp of doing either version of those types of jobs, but the bounty hunters are a little bit more suited to do the bounty jobs, and the smugglers are a little bit more suited to do the smuggling jobs. Not necessarily a bad thing. It just, they're geared towards what they're doing, because the big thing is you're trying to reach 10 fame or infamy in a standard game, and you get points based on doing those jobs. So it's really just a race to see who could do their jobs better or faster than everybody else. We've talked about the components a little bit. I like the larger cards. They're all the same size. The nice thing is, if you do sleeve them and get like the board game medium sleeves, the non-glare matte that I prefer, they come with little boxes, so you can actually store all the cards in those boxes, and it fits all in the box very nicely and cleanly if you do that. Other than that, the comes with a couple bags. If you are looking for more dice, the dice themselves are gold marbled versions of the X-Wing red dice. So if you got X-Wing laying around, you can grab some of your red dice from that and use them in this game if you want to have, especially if you have more players and you want to just have everybody have like some dice near them.
And you'll start to notice when you are facing off against certain ships, it's kind of nice to have all your dice laid out to know what you have and have someone else roll. Mm-hmm. We started seeing that where you had to roll 5 dice and you were facing off someone who had to roll 4 dice,
but there's only 6 in the box. Yeah. Honestly, it's a common Fantasy Flight problem. Is there's usually just not enough dice. You can always pick up reroll thing, and that's a workaround. But sometimes, like you said, it's nice to kind of have like all my dice faces that I did get in front of me for you to remember. This is what you have to beat. The rules themselves are relatively straightforward. It's 3 steps in a turn. There's a planning phase, an action phase, and a counter phase. Planning phase, and the rules reference cards are very well laid out in the sense of you get to, here are your options, pick one. Okay, now in the action phase, do any or all that you like. Okay, so action phase, anything that has labeled action you get to do. You only get to do each action once, but you can do as many different ones as you can or want to at that point. The faction patrols that are out on the board, there's the Imperials, the Rebels, the Hutts, and the Syndicate. They move based on the market decks that you can buy from in the in the action phase. So that's where you get your cargo, that's where you get your jobs, that's where you get your upgrades, possibly new ships, all from this market step in the middle. And that's where the board kind of takes its own little micro turn within your turn if you buy something. And then lastly, you have an encounter. So depending where you are on the board, if you are on one of those patrol spaces, you can encounter them. Or if you're on a planet, you can encounter something on the planet. And the planets also have other NPC named characters or familiar faces that you can encounter as well. So you have a little bit of options all over there. And if you're at a planet that you have a job for, your encounter could be doing that job. So you have a lot of different choices, but you only get to do one of those encounters per turn. So the only other rule that you didn't get to experience, Ricky, was the AI. So playing solo, you play any character you want, and then you set up an AI character who has to... There's very specific ones it can't be. Essentially, it can't be the bounty hunters, which provide a little more player versus player. The deck's just not built for that. It's more so the AI cards is like an AI deck, and on their turn you flip it over, and it has their planning step, and it's do first that applies. This, or this. Okay, I did this. Move on to their planning step or their action step. Do this, or this. Okay, now their encounter step. Do this, or this, or this. And it's a very much an order of operations. You just execute all those things. Card gets discarded, and it's back to your turn. There's a couple weird interactions on there, and there is in the rules reference guide like a 2-page appendix all for the AI. Definitely highly recommend the first time you run through the game with the AI, have that page handy, because there's some weird interactions that can pop up that you just might want a little clarity on. But for the most part, they act like a player.
Fair enough.
What do you think the game did well?
Out of everything, I think it was very well laid out to get someone into it real quick. It did take that like 2 or 3 turns for you to kind of figure out what you're doing, and then afterwards it was just, oh, I know exactly what I'm doing, and I pretty much know what I'm going to be doing for the next 2-3 turns. Like, you got into it and you understood what had to be done. I think the marketplace was very well done. Being able to let you decide what you're going to buy, as well as bury a card and draw from any deck and then decide if you want that. It kind of gave you that mechanic of, well, I want to buy something, but none of these are good. But I know I don't want you to have this one because you are right there, and that will get you an extra fame, and that could end the game right there.
Or $10,000 or something, or it's an upgrade that you really just don't want in your opponent's hands. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Market deck is really well done. The board layout is relatively clear. I do appreciate a lot of the art, like you said early on. Playing X-Wing and playing the other Fantasy Flight Star Wars games, there is a lot of recycled art. So you might see, like, Millennium Falcon's going to look... Art is very much right off of the ship card in X-Wing and things of that nature. But that's not an unusual thing from Fantasy Flight. Even playing the Arkham card game versus Elder Sign versus Eldritch Horror versus the board game, I've seen the same art in that world all over the place. Sometimes it's hard to even remember, like, oh, that's this. Wait, no, that's in the other game. But ultimately, it is pretty. It looks Star Wars. It kind of feels Star Wars. It is a pick up and deliver game at its core. So those are the things that it does well. Some of the opportunities for this game, I feel the player interaction is very low unless you're a group of bounty hunters. And then if you start collecting crew, like you get a crew member that I have a bounty on, then we might start interacting with each other a little bit more. But other than that, we kind of leave each other alone. It's like screwing each other over in the market deck is the most real painful part for another player, and I wish there would be a little bit more in for that.
But with that being said, too, it's a competitive game that doesn't have that over-competitive feel where you feel like you have to cut the throat of someone to win. So I could see it both ways, but yeah, we could have played this game by ourselves and not even known the other one was playing.
Right.
So,
while low player interaction's not a bad thing, almost none.
True.
Is where I feel like this could have had something, because we're talking smugglers and bounty hunters.
They're gonna run into each other.
Right. The more pain that you get is actually like having the patrols move in the wrong spots and having to either fly around them or deal with them. And the patrols seem to be more of the thorn in your side than another player would be.
And I don't believe you couldn't attack each other unless there are certain stipulations on a job.
You have to have a job, or you have to have a bounty that's
or an
on
upgrade.
on that crew. Bosk's personal goal, if you actually flip him over, he can attack someone anytime he wants. But really only gain benefits if someone has more fame than him. He can go attack them and then steal a fame.
Is that all the time you can attack someone and steal fame from them?
That's Bosk's upgraded ability.
Oh, that's only Bosk. Okay.
Right.
Because, I was looking at... There was an upgrade for one card that made it so that anyone could attack you.
Correct.
But I couldn't really figure out a reason why anyone would want to attack you other than disabling you. But
right, which pretty much knocks you out for a turn.
You just can't move for a turn, correct? You can still market phase, and you can still
if you're
encounter.
On a planet, sure. If you're not on a planet and you're out in space, it's pretty much a dead turn.
Fair enough.
So,
but they're stuck on the same tile as you until.
Right.
Oh, but you can't attack them back. Never mind.
Right.
Okay, now I'm following.
Yeah, it's the benefit to that card was that anytime you would gain a fame, you would get an extra fame, which is really powerful. The downside is you literally like come at me, and people can just blast you and stop you. The other thing that you lose, because we didn't have a player interaction and we never really got to the point where we were knocked out. When you're knocked out, you lose 3,000 credits, and you lose any secret cards you may have. And then on your planning step, you have to recover your damage. So it kind of stalls you for a turn where you're standing and gives you a cost penalty. So there's some benefits. The ship upgrades are kind of neat because there's a bunch of different ships you can get. Most of them are very recognizable. You get a generic version of like a YT 1300, and then it has a goal that if you can beat that, you'll get a fame, and then it turns into the Millennium Falcon, which gives you a special power. They have the YV666, which turns into the Houndstooth, Slave 1. Like, all these iconic ships for the characters that you're playing are out there. So it does do a lot of good in that way, but I just feel that player interaction piece is just, I wish there was more to it. I had the same problem with Firefly, though. It's a pick up and deliver game that you really don't mess around with each other. It's just a race to see who does it best. Until they had added the most wanted expansion for that game. So it's definitely a mechanic that if they're looking towards other pick up and deliver space games like Firefly, there are some examples of how to inject that into the game and make it an optional thing if your players want that or not, and just not have that expansion. So who would you recommend this game for?
Any pretty much Star Wars fan who's looking for an easier game to get into. I would say that this is less complicated than a lot of...
This is no Rebellion.
Yeah, this is less complicated than a lot of Star Wars games already put out there. And I mean, it's all in one box. So I mean, you look at a lot of Star Wars games, Imperial Assault.
Well, it's also new.
That's true.
Give it time.
there may be. I don't anticipate a whole lot of expansions for it.
There's a lot of room.
There is a lot of room, and it is a
there's
modular board, so I mean they
Right.
can add a lot to it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
But there's a lot of space for characters and cards and
Fair enough.
ships, and the other opportunity I do see this game having doesn't. When I was first playing it and first setting it up, I was very concerned it was going to have the same problem that Arkham Horror 3rd Edition had, the same problem that Eldritch Horror base game only has, and some of these other adventure games that Fantasy Flight has put out. They put out these small decks of locations like, okay, Castle, there's 10 cards. You're going to see a lot of them. The benefit that this one has is because that's your encounter step, you're not always grabbing a Kessel card.
Mm-hmm.
You're grabbing a job that you're trying to do. You're looking at one of the 2 contacts on there. The contacts run a little bit dry because you're using 100% of them every game. So once you've figured out what Chewbacca does at a contact, you know if you're Han Solo, you just have to go find Chewbacca.
Mm-hmm.
He's out there. Or, Hera Syndulla is out there. You know, once you've played a few times and kind of ingrained some of who these people are and what they do mechanically, you might target them. And they only have 1 card in that data pet deck. So I see potential in the game for expanding those horizons. I thought it was going to hinder it more than it at the very first game I played.
Mm-hmm.
But with how variety you get to do a bunch of other stuff potentially and not just burn through a deck repeatedly, that saves the repetitiveness a little bit.
Yeah. I did also like, I hope you didn't just mention this because then I'll feel like a real jackass. Edit that out. How they make you pull cards. So when you have a really big job, like hijacking a freighter, when you're done with that, you pull it out of there so people can't just mill that deck.
Correct.
Mill the market until they find that again, because it's a lot that you get out of it, or delivering a Rancor and tons of other jobs.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that get recycled in, but then there's like very key things, like you said, the hijack a freighter, the Kessel run that I mentioned earlier. Those are one shots. Once someone has successfully done it, it's out of the game for the rest of the game. So you actually set the card aside and it's over, which I definitely like that, because you don't want those being just recycled. Doing the Rebels a favor, doing the Syndicate a favor, and it's kind of a generic, like, here's 5,000 credits and maybe a reputation. Not a big deal to have those recycled.
Yeah.
So recommend, definitely, if you're into a little bit lighter games. I would say this is on the lighter side. Probably one of the more lightest Star Wars games that's out in the market. Because compared to like Destiny or Imperial Assault or Rebellion, it definitely, I guess it's heavier than Loop and Chewie, but that's a kid's game, so most things are going to be heavier than a Loop and Chewie. But yeah, I think it's really good for that light pick up and deliver game. It does it in a decent amount of time and is very accessible. The 4-player cap is a little restrictive. I always feel that, mostly because I have way too many people to like game
Who
with.
always show up at one time.
So 4-player games just kind of drop off a lot for me. So that would be my one thing. It does play solo, which is why I definitely was excited for it, because I think the most frustrating games I see out there are like this is 3 to 4 players. Like, that's it.
Such an odd number, yeah.
I can't have myself and my wife play. I have to find a third wheel or another couple.
Or a third Ricky.
Yes.
That's me.
That's you. So those are kind of the people we would recommend it for. I would not recommend it for someone looking for a deep, heavy strategy game. You're not gonna. It's there. There is some strategy, but it's not enough to keep you going for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
They're definitely Rebellion is much stronger in that capacity if you're looking for a Star Wars strategy game. If you're not a Star Wars fan, you may want to just pass on this one.
Mm-hmm.
They lean very heavily into the theme. It is very like Solo and Rogue One era is where it's kind of sitting in the timeline. So if those left a bad taste in your mouth and you're a Star Wars fan, maybe not. But
yeah, they do have some rebels and
right, it's the pre-Civil War
mm-hmm.
era, so it's before the original movies,
mm-hmm.
but it's definitely after the prequel movies
mm-hmm.
because you have things like you didn't see them in our games, but Thrawn is in there. Hera from the Rebels is in there. Han and Lando are very much in there, Solo looking.
I'd say
maybe a little bit after that, but
Lando definitely looked more like Billy D. Williams than Donald Glover.
Right, and Solo was like that too.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, it's more that in between time. It's
mm-hmm.
after Solo, but not very far after either.
Yeah.
But I like it in the sense of I think it'll hit the table more as a lighter pick up and go game. But I don't see it getting a lot of mileage with the heavier gamers.
Mm. I don't know. I would definitely play with a group of diehard Star Wars fans. I don't think this is something I would bust out on a Sunday family game day.
Well, unless all your family is diehard Star Wars fans.
My family might enjoy it. I will say that you won't hate your family like Monopoly after playing this game, so...
Low player-on-player action pretty much triggers that.
I mean, you beat me in our last game, and it was just one of those darn moments instead of like me flipping the table and burning down the house.
That's because you almost thought you won, and I just stole it from underneath
you. I think I'm more upset about that. I was very ahead, and then you just kind of gained 6 fame out of nowhere.
Well, it wasn't out of nowhere, but it was very, very fast.
I'm watching you.
But remember, we both had like 4 turns of failing to do our job in a row.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that include me. I'm gonna hold on to this as a win because I forgot about my Lando ability.
It's true.
All right. Well,
I hadn't seen Lando played before, so I knew he had something,
mm-hmm.
but without reading the card.
That's why I grabbed him too. I'm like, oh, you can re-roll a dice. That sounds amazing, and then completely forgot about it for the first half of the game.
Yep.
So I just kept failing everything.
So, final thoughts?
I'm picking up my copy tomorrow, so I mean,
I think it has a home in my collection. I don't know if it's going, like I said, I don't think it's going to hit the table too frequently, but as a solo game, I'm okay with it playing it.
Solo game.
Yes.
I
know.
Get it, Justin.
Yeah. I've been waiting for you to make that joke all this time.
Justin, I don't think you get it. Han Solo.
Yes. The Han Solo game.
It's kind of like Air Force One, but in space.
Yep.
Harrison Ford.
Get off my plane.
Get off my plane.
So, without further ado, I think we give this I give it at least a mediocre pass.
I give it a solid pass. It's a game that, I mean, just playing it, I want to play more.
Sure.
So, this means wrangling up all my friends who like Star Wars and forcing them to play with me. I don't think I'm going to have any problems after they play one game.
Right.
But this isn't a game that my girlfriend's going to play with me because she has particular tastes and Star Wars isn't her IP. So I understand that.
Fair. So next time, you're preparing for a trip.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll be talking about gaming on the go.
And
that isn't taking your Switch with you.
Exactly. A lot of small games packaged, what works when you're traveling, what doesn't work, what to expect, all that fun.
Tips of getting through TSA with games.
Oh, yeah, I have stories about dice. but
I have a story about cards. So we'll talk about that in next time on Tabletop Arcanum. I guess may the force be with you. Is that appropriate? Or are we gonna get sued?
I hope the power
I hope the
in
Space
you?
Wizard's abilities to do weird stuff is in your favor.
This is not the copyright infringement you're looking for?
You've been listening to Tabletop Arcanum, hosted by Justin Taylor and Richard Geese, and featuring the original music by Paul Moore and Isaac Gilbert. You can follow us on most social media platforms. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave us a review on whatever platform you listen to podcasts. As always, thanks for listening.